The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jameson Rabbit, and this week I'm so excited to be joined one last time by a guy. Boy, if you're in Sun Prairie, this is a face and a voice you have to know and love. It's Dan Presser.
Boy, you speak so highly of me. You're the only one in town, but thank you.
I sing your praises.
I appreciate that. And it's always great to be here and get to watch a couple of great movies and have some fun talking about them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is it's exciting. This is episode 516. 6 left.
516.
Just
6
a
left. So
handful.
you're going to 522. See how quickly I did that
You're
math?
good. See?
I know. And I'm a communications guy, and math is still
Nice
in there
job.
somewhere. Yeah, thanks.
Subtraction is addition's tricky friend, but you nailed it. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun today. We have a few movies, a fun throwback, and we'll see what happens.
It was a fun throwback, a very interesting throwback.
Very much so. All right, let's get into what we have though on the marquee this week, and I'll take the first film. It is the newest film starring Mr. Mark Wahlberg. It is Arthur the King from director Simon Kellen Jones. Stars Mark Wahlberg. It's based on a true story about Michael Light and his friend Arthur. Michael is an adventure racer whose rash decisions and stubbornness leaves his team stuck in the mud, literally, when we first meet him. Adventure racing is extreme endurance racing over several days in extreme terrain. Think about like running, climbing mountains, kayaking, mountain biking, 435 miles over 10 days, very little rest, very little sustenance. And after being embarrassed by his previous effort, Michael is home in Colorado with his beautiful wife, and he's moping around, kind of aimless, kind of driftless, just kind of living in regret over what happened and how he was embarrassed in his previous effort. And he keeps saying, "Racers race. I got to race." And with advice from his wife, he decides to give it one last try, going for the championship in 2018, and it is going to be happening in the Dominican Republic. So he puts this 4-person team that he compiles, and there's a lot of doubts about this team. He's got his old friend Chick, who is the navigator, and most believe is too old and broken down to hold up over this. And he's got a young lady, Olivia, who is the daughter of a legendary racer who herself isn't really motivated by this. She really is only doing it to make her father happy. And then you have Leo, played by Simu Liu, who it's his nemesis from his previous team, who is kind of forced onto the team by sponsors because he has a big social media presence. A lot of it built on the back of an embarrassing photo that he posted of Michael failing in the previous attempt. And so after minimal prep time and an all-in approach to the final try at this, throughout all this, we also are cutting to this dog. We see this dog,
the real star of the show,
right? Arthur, living on the streets of Dominican Republic with so many other dogs, just trying to survive. And we kind of bounce back and forth a little bit between them, but really the first 45, 50 minutes of this film is really focused on this team and the endurance racers. And we watch the race go mile after grueling mile, and then we finally, you see it right there, we see the meet cute between Michael and this dog at the first transition point where a desperate man meets a desperate dog. And the eventuality of this meeting is this dog begins following them on their journey, and they're bonding, and this dog saves their lives at one point. And Michael kind of sees himself in this dog and gets attached. Even though he says, "I'm not a dog guy," he becomes very attached.
Hello, dog.
To this dog. And as they overcome adversity, it's Arthur's journey that really becomes the heroic journey in this movie. Like I said, this is all based on a true story. I didn't know anything about this. Did you know anything about this going in?
Not a thing, and it lived up to my expectations because I had very few expectations.
Okay.
But I also walked out of there, and during the movie I had so many questions about, well, first of all, Mark Wahlberg, his character and his wife are living in this beautiful home in
gorgeous,
this beautiful scenery
at the foot of these mountains.
And I'm thinking, how are they affording this? Because he's not really, well, he's working for his father in a real estate company, and I don't know if his wife is working or not.
Well, because at one point they're talking about like, you know, he has to like spend some of their own money, and
to do this,
and it's kind of implied that she's kind of supporting him. And it's like, I'd kick in like $25,000 of my own money. I'm like, you're living in like a $4 million house at the base of the mountains.
What it seemed like to me. I mean, it was like the
There's
scene
nothing around them.
And when he's running in the mountains, it's like, you know, the opening scene of Sound of Music, only with him running. It's just gorgeous. And I'm thinking, how do they afford that? And then secondly, how did that dog get 435 miles? I want to read the book.
I appreciate that because, I mean, and the cinematography in this movie is great because we see so much, and you see all the terrain, and between the meeting of this dog and when the dog really becomes a part of the team climbs mountains, the team zip lines over a massive gorge.
Yes.
And the dog shows up at the next point, and they're like, hey, isn't that dog we saw earlier? And at one point in the movie, I was going, come on. But then they address it also. They're like, how did that dog get here?
Right.
Like, we did this and this and this. How did that dog get here? I go, I appreciate at least you addressed it in the movie.
And I don't know if they even know. I mean, maybe they went back and researched it or tried to figure it out at some point.
Hey, dog, how'd you get over here?
Yeah.
Say hello to your mother for me.
I got a text from you saying, hey, this reminded me of
it's
that
Mark
sketch.
Wahlberg talking to animals. I mean, if you've seen
is.
SNL and Andy Samberg doing the skit, it's pretty funny.
You know, that said, I mean, it was one of those movies, you go to movies like this and you see people working out and you see them, you know, just stretching themselves to the limit of human resources and the limit of human endurance.
Yeah.
And it always kind of inspires you when you see that type of thing. I used to be more inspired that. Now I sit there going like, I would never do that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the part where they were on a line over the gorge.
Holy cow.
That was, the moment that happened in the film, I mean, I was all in right then because my knees were weak just watching that.
Yeah, it's true, like terror, anticipation, everything.
And they had no real qualms about trying it.
Well, what are you going to do?
I know, but I'm just thinking, boy, these people are they are cut out of a different cloth.
Yeah.
And just what they do in those races is incredible. And, you know, this movie is a Mark Wahlberg vehicle. It's his wheelhouse. You know, he's at his best, or, you know, he's in his wheelhouse when he's doing physical, gritty, you know, activity, and he's charismatic, and you know, he's that guy who he's a little bit crusty, but you still like him because he's got all of those qualities of a human being that you're like, you know, you're a good person.
Well, and I like that we spent a lot of time in the beginning really getting a backstory in all of his teammates.
Right.
So it didn't feel like it's Michael and these three other people and this dog, but like I felt like I knew what motivated Chick and Olivia and even Leo. Like I kind of understood them. So then we go on the journey, and then when the dog comes in, I mean, I enjoyed how I don't know how paced the story was, and then I've never been a dog guy up until recently, and so a lot of these dog movies that have come out over the years, I feel are really heavy-handed, going for the emotions, you know, and they kind of, and then recently we just rescued a dog that went through a lot of trauma, and then this whole movie, I'm like, I got out of the movie. I went to the store, I bought a steak. I'm like, I'm spoiling my dog today. You're getting a steak, buddy, because I saw this movie that wrenched my heartstrings.
What's going on, Dad?
You know, and it's just, a lot of it seemed far-fetched, but then I read about it like, oh, this is what really happened. Like, yeah, this is crazy. And shout out, by the way, to the dog actor, a dog named Ukai.
Yeah.
Who did some great things.
Fantastic acting by a dog.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, a movie, you can't watch a movie like that and not, you know, your heartstrings are tugged.
Yeah.
You're going to tear up a little bit at some point, especially if you do like dogs or if you have a dog. And just the relationship that developed between Michael and Arthur the king. Yeah. It's like you said, it's a meet cute. It's really it's a love story between these two people.
And I appreciate there wasn't like necessarily a bad guy in this story. Like there wasn't a menu. Like there's the other team who's probably the better team, the favorite team, and they're battling. But these are people like at the A+ end of competitiveness. Yeah. So it's more of that. It wasn't. I was worried there was going to be some manufacture, like, oh, then the other team sabotages their equipment when they get to one of the transition points or whatever. And it wasn't that. It was all just competitive stuff.
And you know, I was going to say that the villains, the villains are the other team, and his own teammate, the social media guy. He's kind of a villain, but at the end of the day, like you said, their humanity and their nobleness kind of comes out, and they all kind of rally around this dog. Yeah. So it's one of those movies that you feel good walking out of.
Absolutely. What did you end up giving Arthur the King, sir?
So I gave this movie a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's a really, it's a solid movie. It's enjoyable. You're going to enjoy it if you go see it, especially if you love dogs. You might even give it a higher grade. I just thought there were some things that, it's pretty predictable.
It is absolutely predictable. Yeah. But it worked for me. And man, nobody grows a patchy beard quite like Mark Wahlberg. Wow. Every time I see him grow a beard, it looks like this.
He can really look like a homeless man.
I mean, it is a homeless man's beard.
As built as that guy is.
I found myself really enjoying this film. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Oh, good.
Like I said, I mean, going home and making steak for my dog.
Yeah.
Better than I did that night.
And like we've talked about before, it kind of depends on where you're at in your life.
Yeah.
At that point, and you just rescued a dog, and this, boy.
Good stuff. That's in theaters. Also in theaters, we have another film. Sir, why don't you tell us what we have?
Yeah, the movie that I'm going to be introducing now is called One Life. It's based on a true story, and it's directed by James Hawes. It stars Anthony Hopkins as Nicholas Winton, or Nicky, as he's called by those who know him. And when we first meet Nicky, he's an old man. He's a 79-year-old man sifting through the memories of his life and the clutter created by what we soon learn is a very heroic past. And when his wife Greta, played by Lena Olin, convinces him to start cleaning out the clutter and in effect coming to grips with his past, we're transported back to pre-war London where Nicky is played by Johnny Flynn. Nicky is a London stockbroker and banker who's so struck by what's happening in pre-war Europe, specifically Czechoslovakia, he's moved to action. So the Nazis had just signed the Munich Agreement with Great Britain, France, and Italy, and basically gave the resource-rich Sudetenland to the Nazis in return for peace at the time. Mm-hmm. Well, at the same time, refugees were living in extremely poor conditions in Prague, and Nicky ends up going there, and he's introduced to Doreen Warner, I believe her name was, and she's played by Romola Garai. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce her name, but that's what we're going with. She's working for the British Committee for Refugees from Czechoslovakia, and she and her colleagues, Trevor Chadwick, played by Alex Sharp, and Martha Keller, played by Betty Maxwell, they're working to get refugees to safety. And Nicky spends 3 weeks there. He's this wealthy stockbroker from London, and he spends 3 weeks there, and he's shocked by the incredibly poor living conditions, especially for the children. They're living on the street, they're dirty, their families are torn apart, they haven't eaten. So he persuades Doreen and her team to make getting the children, many of them Jewish, out of the country to safety in Great Britain. Nicky returns to London where his mother, played by Helena Bonham Carter, I think her name is Bobby in the film, or Babette. Yeah. She cleverly helps him kind of work through the bureaucracy there in Great Britain, and they start beginning to bring trainloads of children back to Great Britain. And while the people on the ground back in Czechoslovakia, Doreen, Trevor, are really putting their lives at risk, Nicky's back in London really going at it, working through the bureaucracy, running around, getting these kids homes. I mean, it's an inspiring story of people both putting their lives at risk and actually putting their careers and their lives, I guess their livelihood at risk back at home to try and save these families or these children. Yeah. And the film goes back and forth between pre-war,
like 1938
to 1988. So it's a 50-year difference. And so Anthony Hopkins brilliantly plays Nicky as an older man. Mm-hmm. And then, what did I say, the other gentleman?
Johnny Flynn.
Yeah, great performance by him as well. So it kind of shows that juxtaposition. And in modern times, in 1988, it really kind of hinges around this scrapbook that Nicky had basically put together as he was getting these children back to Great Britain. He has pictures of them in there, he has clippings, he has families that might be interested in them. So this scrapbook kind of becomes like the centerpiece of what he did back in the day, and then he's trying to get this scrapbook into the hands of people who can help him preserve the history of what happened
and teach on it.
And teach about the horrors of what happens with war, and also so that others can learn from it in the future. Yeah. So he wants to get it into the right hands, maybe historians or somebody who can tell the story, but he realizes it wasn't just about him. It was about him and the team who were on the ground.
Yeah.
And it eventually gets into the hands of a producer of a BBC program called That's Life. And really the show there, I mean, if you're not a crier, you're going to be after that part of the film, because it's really a fantastic, climax to the film.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I really appreciate, first off, another true story, a history that I didn't know.
Same.
I didn't know the story.
Me neither.
I really appreciated how the subdued tone of this true story, this hero, it really crept up on me. Of course, Anthony Hopkins, he's like a crafty veteran actor at this point in his career, right? I mean, he's late in life, but he does so much with so little now, so little movement.
Yes.
But Johnny Flynn, I thought was great as a really unassuming man who felt compelled to help these children and wouldn't take no for an answer.
Yes.
And pushed and pushed and pushed. And I thought he was great, inspirational, and he overcomes obstacles and just keeps driving. And then, there's thousands of these refugee children and the unsung heroes of the team on the ground in Prague.
Right.
His mother.
His mother, who was a
really not
great
taking no
character.
for an answer.
Yeah.
And then even the guy who was running the British refugee, the immigration program, I guess, who
was giving the papers out.
Who was tasked with, really, he could have been the thing that stopped it all. And he understood these efforts and decided to start getting these visas through quickly to save these lives. And these are heroic people that I'm sure aren't talked about. And I really enjoyed that. And there's the arduous task of finding foster families, finding money, finding papers, getting them on the trains. All of this with the specter of Winter and Hitler both bearing down on them eventually to wipe them out. And I appreciate that they didn't. A lot of times you can really overplay the Nazi fear factor in a movie, I feel like, right? I appreciated that they didn't put the Nazis in your face throughout the film. We weren't cutting to, but it was, you know what's happening. You know that this is coming, and you know the eventuality of what's coming. And then when the Nazis do show up on your doorstep, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. And I really enjoyed this. And then, I mean, talk about heartbreaking. There's echoes in this movie, I thought, with Schindler's List.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Just a man trying to save children.
Do the right thing by humanity.
And then similar, I mean, probably cribbing from Spielberg, there's one girl who's always shown in this movie holding her baby sister, an orphan, 6 years old, having to care for a baby.
Yeah.
And she keeps showing up in photographs and memories, and you're like, I'm like, yeah, that's the girl in the red dress, right?
Yeah.
And I just, and Anthony Hopkins, when we get to the later part and we get to his life, looking back as a man who's haunted and has never forgotten it.
Right.
And knows that this isn't about me. This is about this. And God forbid this ever happens again. We see the efforts that it took to save these poor children. And he had nothing in it, right?
Yeah.
He's just a guy who could have walked away, and his bosses were like, hey, you did what you could. Good job.
Come back and
come
get
on
to
back,
work.
get to work.
Right. And like you said, nobody can fill silence like Anthony Hopkins. I mean, there's long moments where he does absolutely nothing, and so much happens.
Yes.
In those moments. And
he can command a screen,
and it just
with so little effort.
Brings you to, it can bring you to tears, and just the impact that really, obviously, One Life is the name of this movie, and clearly it shows you at one point in this movie, and I don't want to ruin it for people, but you realize the impact that one life can have on so many other lives. So you walk out of the movie really wanting to do something better, at least if you can't. Hopefully you know somebody who is doing something better for the world, because it's one of those movies that makes you feel like you can. And I think I agree with you. The way this movie was shot, and the historic scenes, there was always that sense of tension.
Yeah.
You knew it was coming.
Right.
The monster is coming. The monster
the storm
is coming.
is coming over the hill.
It's coming. And they were beautifully shot,
Yeah.
and the historical accuracy was wonderful. But then the modern scenes were sparse. It almost felt like a mid-century modern home. There's just, his house is that way.
Yeah.
So the whole film felt like that when you were in modern times, and it really, that juxtaposition of it all was so nicely done, I thought. And the performances really by almost everybody in this movie were I thought to myself, there could be some Oscars if this movie was done a little later in the year.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's weird to me that it comes out at the beginning of the year where these kind of movies, you don't normally see them, especially in Anthony Hopkins, project like this. I appreciate it wasn't like super melodramatic throughout.
No.
Like, and it's kind of giving the story, and it was paced out really well, and the bouncing back and forth between the two timelines I thought was done really well.
Yeah.
I never felt lost in it.
No.
Helena Bonham Carter, who I kind of take or leave a lot of times, I thought she was really good.
I thought she was excellent in this film.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge fan. Haven't seen a ton of the movies she's done, but she really does a nice job in this.
She did.
And I was going to say about this movie as well, it kind of reminds you how dedicated people faced with bad things can do good things.
Yes.
I think it's a message we all need to hear, especially right now in the world, because there are a lot of people out there still doing this kind of work. Now, if there's any criticism, maybe it would be that he's a very wealthy man, living in the comfort of Maidstone, England, and he wasn't on the ground there. So, but this man, this would have been worthy of a series of. It would be a great television
and the fact that
series.
it wasn't a guy who was looking for look at all the things I did.
No.
Right?
And he did a lot of other great things too if you learn a little bit more about him. So it's very interesting.
Pretty great, pretty incredible.
Yeah.
What did you end up giving One Life, sir?
So I gave it a 3.5. I'm leaning towards a 4, because it was that good. But there are those people who might think the pace might be a little slow for some folks, but I thought it was perfectly paced.
Yeah, I do too. And that's why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Is that right? I think so. Yeah, there you go.
There it
4 out
is.
of 5 stars, really enjoyable. This movie crept up on me. I was not expecting to be wiping as many tears as I was at the end.
Well, it was one of them when we talked earlier this year about the movies we're anticipating. Because of Anthony Hopkins, it was on my list. I think it was in my honorable mentions.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, definitely was one I wanted to see.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's move ahead with what we have for our movie throwback this week. I asked you to find a movie, and you selected one off of. It's an anniversary movie. What are we talking about?
So we're talking about Blazing Saddles, obviously directed by Mel Brooks. Back in 1974, this movie came out, and of course,
that's 50 years ago.
50 years ago already, and I remember not getting to see this movie when it first came out because I was not quite old enough. But then, when I turned, I believe 13, I got to see this movie, and thought it was maybe one of the funniest movies I'd ever seen because it's basically a spoof of the Wild West, and it. 50 years later, it's a very inappropriate movie in many, many ways, but it was a snapshot of what we accepted in movies back then. And it's basically the story of a small town sheriff, basically, and here he is, Cleavon Little plays the sheriff, and he's basically recruited by the villain of the film, Harvey Korman, to come and be the sheriff in this town that Harvey Korman wants to take over and get all the land and get all the control of the area because the railroad's going through. And there's Gene Wilder, who also plays Cleavon Little's sidekick wonderfully. He's always in those Mel Brooks movies. There's Harvey Korman. I can't remember what this is. What's this? Slim
Pickens.
Slim Pickens. He's in it as well. So there's just a lot of great gags in this show. And as all Mel Brooks films do, there's pieces that just surprise you out of nowhere. He crosses time frames, he crosses, characters. In one scene when Harvey Korman, there's Madeline Kahn plays, and she actually got a supporting actress nod for this. She plays the siren in the movie. But there's one scene in this movie where it's classic Mel Brooks. Well, this scene here is a classic Mel Brooks movie scene, but there's a classic scene where Harvey Korman's trying to get villains to come and help him grab this town and take it over and everything. And there's just the picture of the line, and you have people from all different time eras. You've got Nazi soldiers, you have people from Saudi Arabia, you have killers and thieves from all different walks of lives. It's just your classic Mel Brooks moment.
Just
where
absurdity.
It's absurd, it doesn't fit, but it just makes you laugh because it is so absurd.
Well, this is Mel Brooks throwing fastballs in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
This is him at his peak, and this is a movie that couldn't be made today. But I'm watching it, I'm like, but should it? Because I feel like it's this is a classic movie is being re-examined by people now and looking back at it and go, this is horribly offensive and we need to cancel this, whatever. But And it's cringe watching at points now.
It
You're
is.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also genius in several points. And I think it challenged the norms, and it's great to challenge the norms. And it shone a light on ignorance, right? And you have Cleavon Little's character. It's a very anti-racist film, and you put Cleavon Little in the midst of all these ignorant racists. And Bart's a great character, and he doesn't back down, and he outsmarts those around him who are setting him up for failure.
Right.
And making fools out of them. And I think, it's tough to look back on some of the things that are said, and but in context, this is a great film, a legendary comedy.
Right, and it's like you said, it's poking racism in the eye. It's poking vulgarity in the eye. All of those things. One moment in this film is a classic. Alex Karras plays Mongo, and he's the big dumb cowboy, I guess, and he punches the horse and knocks it over. Now, even that would not be
no, we're not doing that.
Be acceptable today. But it's a very funny movie moment, and obviously no animals were harmed in this movie. But it was.
I'll take your word on that.
That's what I heard.
Okay.
But it's one of those movies, especially when you're a teenage boy and maybe a little older. I can't remember laughing harder at a movie than I did at this movie back then. And Harvey Korman. This movie is a reminder to me how much of a comedic genius Harvey Korman was.
Mm-hmm.
He's really, back then, one of the kings of sketch comedy because of his time in Carol Burnett, and it really shows in this film, I think.
It's great. Yeah. Mel Brooks in this time period was just putting out masterpieces.
Yeah, he was in his prime, for sure.
So good.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look ahead at what is coming soon. I'm looking at the weekend of March 29th, where we have a few new films in theaters. The first one is Godzilla x Kong, Godzilla and Kong, New Empire. It's a continuation of the Titan storyline, the monster-verse, as you will. Like Batman versus Superman, the question is, will these two mighty adversaries come together to save the world? We're going to find out soon. We also have In the Land of Saints and Sinners, a new crime action thriller starring Kerry Condon and Liam Neeson. So you can guess what's going on here.
What's going to happen
there?
A
damaged father fights for redemption after a lifetime of sins, but at what cost?
At what cost?
And then lastly, we have Asphalt City, a thriller starring Sean Penn and Ty Sheridan. Looks like a Training Day featuring New York City paramedics, where you have the grizzled vet who does things his own way, and the young recruit who has to decide he's going to listen or not.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. Before we move further, I want to thank you, sir, for being a part of this program for the last few years. Well, I've never worked with a more professional broadcaster. Every time I have you on the show, I walk away going, God damn, Presser, he makes it so easy.
Wow.
And I really enjoy getting to collaborate with you. You've had me collaborating on your program from time to time. And it's something that I've really enjoyed kind of having you on here, getting to know you more.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, and I would say the exact same thing about you. You've been doing this show for 10 years, 516 episodes on your way to 522 episodes. That doesn't happen in, I'm going to call this TV, very often.
They don't
and you've
cancel
done
shows.
it all, I know, but you've done it all for the love of movies and the love of talking to people about movies, and that, you're helping people out there get an idea of the movies that they might want to see and check out, and I appreciate that, and I've appreciated being on the program.
Also, if you're looking for one of the city's finest actors, you can look no further than this guy right here.
But just check a few people before you.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Speaking of thank yous, we want to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters, the Palace here in Sunbury. Thank you for sponsoring this program. Always appreciate that. Enjoy a nice dream lounger. Next week, I'm going to be talking about films such as Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, the Sydney Sweeney non-horror film Immaculate, and the streaming film Roadhouse starring Jake Gyllenhaal. And I'm going to be joined by my old friend Jason Spencer, who we haven't had on the program in quite a while. He's going to be joining us live on location from Oklahoma, I believe. So stay tuned for all of that.
Very cool.
Yeah, it should be a good time as we roll towards the end of this show. But again, thank you. I'm glad to get you on one more time before it was all over. And
I'm glad I got to be on one more time and enjoy the rest of the ride. And
yeah, right.
We'll be watching.
We'll do. All right. Until next week, though, I'm Jameson.
And I'm Dan.
Thanks for watching.